Now, live with Greg Olsen, Director of the New York State Office for the Aging.
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I'm so glad you're with me today. My name is Greg Olsen. I'm the Director of the New York State Office for Aging. Really important topic that we're going to talk about today, and I have some wonderful guests that I'm going to introduce in a second. But I do want to place a little context around this. Last week was Nationally Older Driver Safety Awareness Week, and it's a really important topic. In 2021, 7,500 older adults were killed in car accidents and tens of thousands more injured. But there are things that we can do. What we do know about our culture, and it's really important, is how intrinsic and important the automobile is to us, right? You often hear things like you are what you eat, but the car can often be a reflection of our own personalities. And I don't know if you're like me and you drive around, it seems like traffic, there's so many more cars on the road these days. And the way that we've designed our community, especially after World War II in New York State, where people moved out of urban centers into suburban areas, and into rural areas, the automobile is critically important to our overall health and wellness. There are more drivers, and losing the ability to drive, which over 1 million people do every year for a variety of reasons, can really be devastating and have an impact on social isolation, accessing community, accessing friends, medical appointments, and anything else. So we're going to talk some strategies today to, have that conversation and some other tools that are available. There are many factors affecting driver safety for older adults, but age alone is not a predictor of risk. In fact, research shows that older adults as a group successfully adjust for age-related changes that otherwise affect safe driving practices. According to the CDC, drivers 55 and older are actually involved in fewer crashes than other groups, but unfortunately, when they're involved in crashes, they're more susceptible to injury and to death. So driver safety programs are available, and they help older adults with skills training. Older drivers can also improve their safety if they ensure that their cars are correctly adjusted to them. What that's called is CarFit, and it can improve the safety of passengers just as it improves the safety of the driver. So today we're joined by Licet Gaveau and Rob Lopez, and they're with the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, along with Donna Stressel, who's from Sunnyview Rehabilitation Hospital, and I'll give you some of their credentials in a second. But our topic today, as you can see, is older driver safety and the Department of Motor Vehicles CarFit program. But before we dig into this topic, we want to share something with you as we move into the holidays and the colder season. We have a partnership with Get Set Up that offers more than 4,500 lifelong learning courses, health and wellness courses, tours. I mean, if you can imagine it, they have it. But there's also an opportunity for people over the age of 50 to actually teach classes based on their interests and hobby. So why don't you take a look?
Imagine having access to an online community of your peers, a place where you can explore your interests through hundreds of online classes. Well, that community is available now, right at your fingertips. Hi, my name is Greg Olsen, and I'm the Director of the New York State Office for Aging. NYSOFA has partnered with Get Set Up, an online platform that helps older adults become more fit, learn to manage their finances, develop new skills, supplement their income, and connect with people all over the world. Best yet, if you're an older adult in New York State, this resource is available to you free of charge with no limits. Do you want to learn more? Well, then visit the link on your screen to explore free classes today and join a community that has already helped nearly 200,000 older New Yorkers stay engaged.
So check it out. It's amazing. So let me formally introduce my guest today. So I want to read this so I don't butcher it. So Licet Gaveau, she's at least in the middle of where I am, is the executive director of the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee here in New York State. Welcome. We also have Rob Lopez, who's the Highway Safety Program representative for the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee. Welcome, Rob. And we also have Donna Stressel, who's in the outpatient therapy department at Sunnyview Rehab Hospital, which is right here in the Capital District. So welcome, Donna. So let me start with my friends at the GTSC. And again, that's the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee. Tell us what the GTSC is and what's its role in older driver safety here in New York.
So GTSC is a group of agencies that work together with one common mission. Our agencies are Department of Aging is our partner. We have State Police, Department of Health, Department of Education. We all work together to educate, enforce our traffic safety mission. Who we are and how we started, we'll use that slide, Alex, thanks, is originally this program started in 1966 when Congress passed the Federal Highway Safety Act and created the program designed to reduce traffic accidents, deaths, injuries, and property damage. What we've seen is a tremendous change. We went from 2,864 fatalities in 1966 down to half by 2020. When it came to injuries, we saw a great reduction in injuries. In 1969, the injuries were reported at 353,000 injuries. We are down to 83,000 by 2020. We still have a lot of work to do in New York as these numbers are still too high. No one wants to get a call that someone in their family, a friend, was in a crash and was injured or died. So what we do is our mission is really to foster that safe, inclusive, equitable transportation in New York. We want to prevent roadway injuries and death. One of our big conversations among all of our groups is really to build and sustain a collaborative effort with our partners. Again, that preventing injuries, that preventing death is high on our list. We're looking to do that through education, through engineering, and really through caring with the community. One of the things that we do with our communities is we provide grants. We also have a survivors advocate program where we have survivors of these terrible injuries and of crashes speak at events. We do community outreach, just like CarFit, one of our great programs for the aging. So
before I ask you the next question, Alex, can you pull up that initial slide? Because I know that you said we still have a lot of work to do, but I think the data really needs to set in. That's over a 55-year period. And you see over a 50% reduction in fatalities, and the injuries went down, significantly. So you're right. But there's so many more drivers on the road today, and you have other issues. In addition to inexperience, you have something called the cell phone. And I can tell you, when I drive around, I don't care if you are 25, I've seen 65-year-olds that still literally are driving with their phones. So my point being that is a tremendous improvement from 66 to 20 in those areas. So do you have data on older drivers? Because we have 4.84 million people over the age of 60 in New York State, and obviously the population's getting older. So are you seeing what kind of data do you have on older drivers?
So I'm going to give that to Rob. We have good news for older drivers, but still something for us to work on. Rob?
Sure. So currently, as of 2022, and I'm honing the data down New York State specific, we have approximately 12.2 million licensed drivers. Of that 12.2 million, approximately 2.9 million are 65 or older. So that's already approaching 24% of our licensed drivers here in New York are 65 and older. In that same year, 2022, we had 214 fatalities, fatal crashes involving a driver 65 and older, and 18,000 injuries. And I should qualify that by saying that that does not necessarily mean that the driver age 65 or older was at fault. It's just that the injury or the fatality was sustained by that individual.
Right. we're statutorily required to serve people over the age of 60. So I'm sure that number would go up from the 60 to 64s that are driving. And we know, through Governor Hochul's initiatives and being an age-friendly, state, the way that they're revamping downtowns to improve pedestrian safety with drivers is a priority of the state as well. So, Donna, let me ask you a question. You're an occupational therapist. And for our viewers who may not be familiar with what an OT is, what role do you play in helping older drivers become safer drivers?
Well, in my expertise with driving rehab, we work with individuals of all ages, trying to help them to be safe, independent drivers for as long as possible. And that might be to work on driving modification as to when and where they drive. A lot of times, if there's an injury or illness, we want to make sure they are safe to drive. And sometimes there may be adaptive equipment that's needed to enable them to return to safe driving after something like a stroke, a spinal cord injury, or something like that. And then in the event that somebody's not safe to drive, we want to help to make sure that they can still stay connected to their community by using whatever public transportation or independent resources that are available so that they can still remain independent and get to those places they want or need to be going.
Yeah, and we know that, older adults for, a lot of times self-select decisions that improve safety, like not driving at night, for example, driving slower. And I know people get upset sometimes when they see a slow driver and they immediately think it's an older person, but that actually reduces the rate of injuries and possibly even death. But what are some of the other things that change in your experience physically as we age that might affect your ability to drive and drive safely?
There's three areas that we like to look at, and vision is probably the most critical. 98% of what we do driving is based on what information we receive through our vision system. And as we age, older eyes require more light to see. And also, you may have reduction in peripheral vision, what you can see to the sides. Glare recovery can be an issue. And as we age, there's an increased likelihood of having medical conditions such as cataracts, glaucoma, or macular degeneration. With that, a lot of things we make recommendations to if vision can't be corrected through like cataract surgery or corrective lenses. A lot of times we recommend driving daylight hours or staying in areas that are well lit. So there's a lot of things, bad visibility days, such as rain and fog, maybe stay home. And I'm a real proponent of driving with your headlights on 24/7. It helps you to be more visible for somebody who might be having a visual problem. The next area we look at is cognition, which is really the thinking skills. And that's paying attention, processing speed, and making good judgments and reasoning. And again, most older adults do very good in those areas, but sometimes there is a medical condition that could make those skills more challenging, such as Alzheimer's or a dementia. And that's the time sometimes when we have to start counseling somebody that they may not be safe to drive. The physical area is the easiest area to help someone to adapt. As we all age, and we age at different rates, but certain things are inevitable. A lot of times we get shorter in our stature, our bones and muscles aren't as strong, our reflexes may slow down, we may lose flexibility. So there's a lot we can do with either, selecting vehicles that fit people better. There might be, the technology is really increasing that can help in a lot of those areas. And then again, like I said, if somebody has like an amputation or is paralyzed, they may be appropriate for driving with either hand controls or other types of adaptive equipment to help them drive. They may not be safe to drive with their feet, but they're absolutely safe to drive with other adaptive equipment. So we would do the evaluation and training to make sure that they can do that and where they would get that equipment put on their vehicle.
Yeah, and one of the things that you talked about that I always think about when I drive, especially if I'm driving in other states, having some of those states that have the reflectors in the road, like a Florida or Vermont, and just how great that is, especially in the rain, because you can see perfectly. But you mentioned adaptive equipment, and I think a lot of people probably know that there is some but have no idea what those types of things are. So if you could kind of walk through, what's possible in terms of adapting your vehicle to make it, fit better or more safe.
Mhm. And as I alluded to before, there's a lot of new technology on vehicles that is, when people are looking to purchase cars, they can look for cars that not only do they fit better in, but might have, again, the blind spot warnings. Backup cameras are now on all vehicles, but sometimes the other alert systems, the crash mitigation, the lane departure, and those types of features are actually on the vehicle. If somebody, if that vehicle doesn't fit them well, one of the things we do with CarFits is we have gadgets. A lot of times with shorter people, they need seat cushions just so they can see better over the steering wheel. And I often find that the proper height helps to make that seat belt fit better, as well as visibility. There are things, if people have problems with the way the seat belt fits over their neck, it rubs their neck. So we can, if we can't get a proper adjustment through the seat belt itself, there are some things we can attach to that seat belt to help keep it in place, or so that it's not as rough when it rubs against the neck. Sometimes people have difficulty getting in and out of the vehicle. And again, there can be some devices that they can use to help them, to give them something to push up on so that they can get easily into the vehicle, or more importantly, out of the vehicle. So there are some other gadgets that are kind of what we would call add-ons to help them fit better. And then, of course, with certain medical conditions, now we're looking at like hand controls, left foot accelerators, wheel spinners, which is a modification to the vehicle. And when that's done, they have to have that installed on their vehicle and comply with the state's Department of Motor Vehicles licensing laws to have their license properly amended.
Interesting. And so the video that we were showing, and we're going to talk more about the CarFit program in the second segment, is actually a CarFit program where somebody can go in and have a look at how the car actually fits them, and some recommendations for some of those changes. So, I talked about in the beginning, and this is really for all three of you or any of you, how difficult it is to give up your keys for one reason or another. And I think, children or others of older adults can pretty flippantly say, I don't think mom should drive anymore, and not really understand what the ramifications of that means to the mom or the dad who's been independent and accessing the community and not isolated, etc. But there does come a time where I think that concern warrants a conversation. I'm going to ask Alex to put into, there it is right there. We have a guide which we're updating, but much of it is still relevant on how you have this conversation. But can you guys talk about, what somebody can do if they have concerns about themselves or somebody else and their driving abilities?
Sure, I think I can speak to that a little bit. I would say one of the first things, if you are concerned, as the title of the publication states, is start looking at the vehicle that your loved one is driving. There may be some telltale signs as far as dents and dings that may not have been there last week. You can start seeing little trends or patterns as to, if a scratch along the side of the vehicle maybe is due to impact, coming in or out of the garage, things of that nature. And obviously take notes and kind of track to see if over a period of time, things seem to be getting progressively worse. The other thing, and this is one of the things that the publication mentions, is go for a ride. Go for a ride with your parent or grandparent, whoever it is. And as the book says, at this point, this is where silence is golden, because if you see some things that concern you, then and there is not really the time to speak about it, only because it's going to potentially exacerbate the problem. Similarly, probably immediately after you do that, you might want to take some time before you bring the topic up, in as gentle and diplomatic fashion as possible. And again, that's why this resource is so good, because it speaks to some of those things and how to begin that conversation.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying, Rob, because what you're not saying is go in and take the keys. You're saying, you can evaluate, you can look, you can see if the car fits somebody there. You could talk about some of the things that Donna talked about, right? That it
Absolutely.
might not necessarily be, okay, we have to, we got to retire the keys, but there are things that we could potentially do to improve overall safety. And then if you are winding up at that point where you're really, really concerned because of what you see or those changes didn't make sense, then there's a more diplomatic way to have the conversation.
Certainly.
And I think one thing too is to have the conversation before there is a problem. A lot of times, people
Correct.
are talking about retirement, when they're going to downsize their home, when they're going to move to a community. And these are good times to bring up the topic of driving before anyone's having any issues. So it's a comfortable conversation, and you can ask them, if and when that time comes, who do you want to be the one to tell you that they're concerned? How do you want to be involved in this? Sometimes people wait until there's a crisis and then they're playing catch up, or there's a lot of emotion that's going behind it. So again, having those conversations long before there's a problem to involve that person is how they want this, to evolve. Who do they want? Do they want the doctor to, be the one to bring it up? And certainly if there's a change in their medical status, that would be a good time. But hopefully the last person you want to be the one to start this conversation is the police officer that's pulled them over.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you guys, like I said, I drive around a lot for my job. I'm sure you guys do as well. You see the signs, don't drive high, DWI, right? Impaired driving, we often think about is alcohol related. Now we have legalized marijuana, so that's potentially an issue, and other types of drugs. What we don't often talk about is the interaction of either a single or multiple medications. And many of the folks that we serve are on 4, 5, 6+ medications. So can you talk a little bit about how medications can impact somebody's driving? And maybe even going back to the conversation, that may be something, Rob, right, you would want to look at if you're somebody who's older in your life is driving, you're concerned, and then you find out, well, they're on 6 or 7 medications.
Absolutely. There is such a thing as, being cited for driving while impaired under the influence of prescription drugs. And there's been numerous people who have been beset with that situation. So obviously, knowing how a particular prescription medication interacts with you, does it cause drowsiness? Does it, cause any other effects with vision, cognition, things like that? And of course, Donna can probably speak in more detail to that as well.
Yeah. Any medication can have a negative effect, and just because it doesn't affect one person, we all respond differently. So usually the recommendation is, if you start a new medication, not to drive until you know how you're going to be affected a day or two. Sometimes starting a new medication, sometimes coming off of a medication can be a problem as well. When you start combining medications, now you're getting a cocktail, and the effects can sometimes be intensified, and the mix can be deadly. So again, you got to be careful. And then there are certain medications that are more problematic. Any type of painkiller, benzodiazepines, and psychotropic medications, generally you've got to be very careful. And as Rob was saying, even if you're taking a medication as prescribed by your doctor, you still could get a DWI if you are impaired and driving and a crash occur. So you really want to be careful, not only with medications from the doctor, but also over-the-counter medications can be a problem as well. Some of the cold medications, flu medications.
Yeah, so I would assume you guys would agree with this recommendation. I live in a suburb outside of Albany, in the pharmacy all the time. The line for getting your medications is probably 85% older adults, right? And how did they all get there? They drove. So I'm assuming you would also recommend, if you're picking up a prescription, to talk to your pharmacist about the other prescriptions you may be taking as well, and whether it's safe or not to drive.
Absolutely. And a lot of times what happens is you get different medications from different doctors, and, they don't always know what you're taking. And sometimes it could be a problem. You can be getting, especially when you come out of the hospital, you're giving medications, and you can be getting the same medication under a different brand name, and you really want to check with your pharmacist. I usually say at least a year, or sometimes if you're starting a new med, to see, are there any interactions? Are you those correct? There's also sometimes foods that can interact with that. And absolutely, you got to be very careful. And I recommend, maybe not drinking alcohol if you're taking medications, because that can also mix with them negatively.
Right. Thanks. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We have another opportunity. We talked about this in November. For anybody over the age of 50, there's a free resource out there called TEPSAT, the Elder Preparedness Self-Assessment Tool. It's a great time around the holidays to go through this and really prepare, not just in healthcare, but really in all aspects of your life. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Greg Olsen, and I'm the director of the New York State Office for Aging. When you need to replace your refrigerator, maybe a washer or dryer, or how about a vehicle, do you do a little bit of research first before you make that big purchase? The answer is, of course you do. What we don't do is plan very well for getting older, understanding what to think about, what to plan for, what services might be available, who pays for them, and it can be very complex, but it is truly necessary. I want to introduce you to the TEPSAT, which is a fantastic planning tool. A perfect time to do the TEPSAT is when you gather over the holidays. Please share it with your friends, family, and neighbors, and sit down and get yourself prepared for the things that you need to think about as you grow up and grow older. Please take a look at the link below and take the TEPSAT tool over the holidays.
All right, so let's talk about, from the GTS's perspective, what programs and services do you have that help older adults and their families deal with an aging driver?
So I just wanted to say that our program with the CarFit is not, it's really to help the older adult remain in their vehicle. We're not saying to take away the keys yet. We're saying we do want people driving. We want them safe in their vehicles. So it's really a method to getting just a little bit of a tweak to the way you place your seatbelt on, to what to look for on your vehicle, the things that Rob was mentioning earlier, to set yourself up if there is in fact a crash, that you are that the injuries are less egregious. Rob, what are your thoughts on that?
I agree. The premise of CarFit is, again, just as the name alludes to, it's to get your best fit in your personal vehicle. Items such as how the shoulder portion of the seatbelt fits over your shoulder. Some of these CarFit texts that you see here are explaining to the folks going through the CarFit session how to adjust their mirrors to minimize blind spots. Proper positioning in terms of your distance from the airbag to your torso, and that the airbag should not be pointed up toward your face, but again, toward your torso. That you should minimally have 3 inches of a line of sight over your steering wheel. And those are all things that actually, for anyone, not just an older driver, but anyone can benefit from having those best practices if, God forbid, they're involved in a crash.
Right, and I've also seen those things that go on the rear view mirror, because you were talking about the loss. I think Donna was talking about the loss of peripheral vision, where you can gain that back by just an enhancement to the rear view mirror, so you can see, if you're not able to turn your head or losing that peripheral vision. You guys do a lot to help improve, and going back to what Licet said, I hope I wasn't implying, that you were attempting to take people's keys. Families do, though. And that's why I appreciate what you guys are doing, because that's not always necessary. I mean, I've seen it in my own family when an older adult showed up at Thanksgiving with a pile of leaves in the grill of the car, right? And everybody starts joking, it's time to take the keys. And maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But that's a life-changing decision for somebody that, has always driven and relied on that. But you guys provided a couple of new terms for me that I didn't really understand. And so what I was hoping you could tell me, what's the difference between a driver rehabilitation program and a driver re-evaluation program?
So I would say that Donna, if Donna wants to speak to the driver rehabilitation portion, and then I can speak to the actual DMV driver reevaluation.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't, the question, we're assuming everybody coming in is a safe and independent driver. A driver evaluation is usually generated when there's been a medical diagnosis happened acutely, like a stroke or a spinal cord injury, or sometimes with more of a long-term disability such as it's generated by the doctor. And then the evaluation at our program is 2 hours, starting with a clinical assessment where we take a look at all those areas that you need good skills in to be a safe driver. And then an on-road assessment, which is different from a DMV road test. It's about 45 minutes to an hour, regular driving, no parallel parking. But we're looking to make sure someone can control a vehicle, pay attention to all the signs, signals, rules of the road, and interact with traffic safely. A lot of times we may pick up what I call bad behavior, maybe not good habits or rusty road habits where somebody, we can, through education, make them check their blind spots. A lot of older drivers were never learn to do that. We can kind of talk about, those type of things to improve it. But if we identify a problem area, what we want to do is see if we can fix that, whether it be, again, through retraining or adaptive equipment. Sometimes it's a matter of, you're still in recovery. You need to wait a little bit longer to these skills improve before you return to driving. And then the event with a lot of progressive disorders, there are some times where people are no longer safe to drive. And it's sometimes easier to hear that from somebody who's not a family member. We're that objective third party that can, advise them not to drive. We have no power to take a driver's license away, but we give them our best advice. And then again, what we want to do is help them to find resources in the community so that they can stay where they are and still, receive those resources that they need. They can still get their groceries, their meds, get to church or whatever activities they want to go to.
Yeah, thanks. I'm sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that. As Licet mentioned, the premise of everything that we do in terms of CarFit and any type of older driver safety education and outreach is for the purpose of helping our aging drivers continue to drive safely and as long as possible. So the opposite of the conversations that loved ones may have with their aging family member is if you get to the point where now you get a letter from DMV and you've been called in to submit to a reexamination. And that's the difference between that and what Donna just mentioned, is that the reevaluation that's conducted by DMV involves retesting a driver that is deemed at risk for either medical reasons or as a result of some type of general observation of their driving or some type of crash incident. And the results of that are binding. If you are required to submit to a reexamination by the DMV and you're not successful, then your privilege to drive does get revoked.
Okay. No, thanks for that clarification.
Sure.
So you guys talked about the CarFit program, and I think we really want to delve into the list a little bit more. We want to expand the collective we. So the GTSC, DMV, folks like Donna that do this as well and train folks, and the State Office for Aging. I think this is the beginning of a partnership where we hopefully can grow CarFit programs around the state. We saw a little bit of the video of somebody doing this, but these can be in parking lots for groups, very similar to if you're putting a child safety seat in and the police are helping you do that safely, as well as individualized CarFit programs. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yep. A lot of the times around here, we like to provide them at places where you would naturally get a group of older drivers. We've provided them at some of the senior living communities, departments of aging. places where you have, folks that are readily available. There are options to contact. Sometimes the AAA offices will have volunteers who are trained in CarFit, and they're available for a one-on-one appointment. But you'd want to call your AAA office first to make sure that there is somebody trained to do that, and then schedule an appointment so they're available to meet with you on that one-on-one assessment.
Okay, I just want to be clear for the audience. We have two sets of AAAs. Our AAAs are area agencies on aging, or offices of the aging. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about AAA CAR, the American Automobile Association. So I just wanted to be clear on that. So one of the things that we had talked about, again, all four of us, was the need for volunteers to be trained as coordinators or technicians, so that we can expand at the local level the ability to do more of these CarFit programs. Donna, how do people go about doing that?
There's different levels of volunteers, and we have volunteers from various different organizations. So you don't have to necessarily be involved in traffic safety. The first level is a technician, and they're really the nuts and bolts of the program. They're the folks that you saw in the video who are meeting with that driver who comes in and going through the 12-point checklist to provide information on how to make the adjustments to their vehicles so that they have the safest fit. The next level up would be a coordinator, and they are trained technicians who have additional training on how to organize events. So how to stage an event, the contacts to make, how to interface with the national organization to report results. And then the top level is the instructor level, which can train coordinators. Coordinators can train individuals to be technicians, but only an instructor can train someone to be coordinators. So there are different levels you can get involved in to be a trained coordinator. And if anyone's interested in that, they can contact Rob or myself, and we do trainings usually in the spring to gear up for the next coming season of CarFit. And
Rob, I know you have others within the GTSC that have a similar role than you do, and that's where you get your statewideness. But for both Licet and Rob, if somebody at the local level, it could be who's watching this, it could be an assisted living, right, where they have drivers, it could be senior housing, or just the general public, it could be our AAAs, not-for-profit organizations. If they wanted to bring a CarFit program to their residents or community, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because that's what we love to hear, if that participation really from the community. So GTSC, one of the things that we do is we provide grant funding. And with that funding, if there's an organization, nonprofit, a municipality that would like a CarFit in their organization, we basically provide what we would call a highway safety grant. You call us, we help you with the process on what you need to apply, what resources are needed for the application itself. Once you receive your grant, then we can guide you in how to execute the grant and what is needed in order to continue that grant. So we have grant funding on one side, and then we have the actual training, or if you want a CarFit in your, let's say you're at a community center and the community center says, this is something we would like to do just on a one-time basis. Then we would call Rob, call myself, and we would be able to set a date and a time, do a training with you, and then participate on the event itself.
That's fantastic. So anybody listening, if you're from an organization, there's the phone number right there. And if anybody's interested in volunteering, regardless of what age, to be trained so that we could build capacity to have more of these throughout New York, same process. So I think that's amazing. These are great resources and tools. Donna, how can somebody shave points or save some of their insurance dollars by some of the online offerings that are available today?
Yep, both the American Automobile Association as well as AARP offer defensive driving courses that are specifically geared for seniors. And there's other defensive driving courses as well that is not age specific. But that's a 6-hour course where once you've completed the course, you're entitled to a point reduction as well as a 10% reduction on your collision and liability insurance. And, I'm a strong believer. You can go to these courses and you can always pick up something. There's not only certain rules that have changed over the years, but certain vehicle design considerations. So they're a wonderful way to gain information and get the benefit of insurance reduction if need be.
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So if I asked any of my listeners out there, we could help you put $7,200 in your Social Security checks every year. Would you think we're crazy? Take a look.
Hi, my name is Heather Leddick with New York State Office for the Aging Health Insurance Information, Counseling, and Assistance Program. The Medicare Savings Program is a program designed to save Medicare beneficiaries up to $7,000 annually. For those of you currently receiving the benefit, don't forget you may need to renew. Notices can come from your local Department of Social Services, your Medicare Advantage Health Plan, or New York State of Health. Don't miss out. Return your renewal form today. You wouldn't want to lose out on this important benefit that helps save you money. If you have any questions in regards to the renewal or the Medicare Savings Program, you can reach out to HICAP at 1-800-701-0501. Thank you.
I hope you guys call. Those are benefits that you absolutely are entitled to and need and can significantly help in this economy with your economic security. Alex, let's get to some questions that I know we have from the audience. I'll ask the first one. There we go. Are there specific warning signs to know when an older driver needs help? Anybody?
I can jump in, having driven with thousands of older drivers. There's speed management, sometimes driving too fast, sometimes driving too slow. Obviously, you want to try to be predictable. And my advice to somebody when you said, they're driving slow to be safe, if you're driving more than 10 miles per hour below the speed limit without a good cause, such as weather or traffic conditions, then you become the hazard. So if they're driving really slow because they can't see, they can't process, they can't react, that's a warning sign. Missing signs and signals, not paying attention to the traffic control devices or other traffic, not staying in their lane, drifting out of their lane either to the left or right or making wide turns, abrupt stops. Sometimes people, when they start having trouble with the pedals, they switch to a 2-foot approach, driving with 1 foot on the gas, 1 foot on the brake, and they're actually depressing both pedals at the same time. Getting lost in familiar places. So some of those things, and again, as Rob said earlier, just looking at the car, are there any dings or marks on the car that they can't explain? Those could be warning signs as well. And again, as he said, taking a ride with that driver just to keep an eye on them to see if they're having any difficulties. And it might just be in certain circumstances, but all of those are warning signs that you can pay attention to.
Yeah, thank you. And I think every driver in the state of New York could learn how to better drive around the circles that are showing up everywhere in the traffic patterns. We got another one. Here we go. Do you recommend transition steps to help an older driver adjust? And there's some examples there: shorter trips, driving only during certain hours, etc.
Sure. Those suggestions are very good. In addition to that, not only shorter trips or during daylight hours, but if you find yourself overwhelmed by the sheer volume of traffic on the interstates, then it may be a good idea to, avoid them and take more local roads. That's one of the things that a lot of folks do as they age for that very reason. Also, in terms of like the daylight driving, there are certain times of the day that are more challenging than others, such as dawn or dusk. During the inclement weather, like the rain or the snow, if you can adjust your routine, your schedule, to make provision to modify your driving during those situations. All of those things can be very helpful.
That's great. Do we have another one? Okay, this one we can collectively answer. What transportation options exist for older adults who can no longer drive? I mean, that's the crux of the matter, right?
Sure thing.
There's a lot of things. Like I said, one of the things I like to tell people is to try some of these options out before you need them. So when that time comes, when you do stop driving, you're not so unfamiliar. Around here, we have a lot of public options, whether it be through the bus system, not only the fixed route systems, but there is paratransit, which is a curb-to-curb service through the public transportation system. A lot of the communities have senior transportation, and again, you can contact the local senior center to find out if there's senior transportation there. There are a lot of volunteer programs. A lot of towns have volunteer drivers that can provide trips. A lot of times they're more for medical appointments and not so much the pleasure transport. But a lot of times they have them. And then the big game changer too is with Lyft and Uber and some of those rideshare services. And even if the person that's no longer driving does not have a cell phone, there's other ways through GoGo Grandparent where somebody else can arrange those trips as well. When you get more into rural communities, it's a lot harder to find some of those options. A lot of times you are relying on families to provide the bulk of the transportation. And what I find sometimes is hiring a driver works out best in those communities. And when I say hiring a driver, there might be a neighbor, a family, a college kid, a church member who is willing to take somebody, to different appointments or, let them know when they're going to the store or something like that. And I know that sometimes asking for a ride is much harder than somebody giving a ride. And when I say hiring a driver, that person might be more likely to ask for a ride if there's an exchange of money, if they feel like they're contributing, whether it be through money or doing another service for them. But sometimes those formal arrangements work out the best in some of those rural communities where transportation, resources are quite limited.
Yeah, good. And I'm going to build upon some of what you had talked about. So for folks out there, 95% of New York State's geography doesn't have any public transportation, but a lot of the dense areas do. And sometimes people just don't know how to use it, right? So there are three things regarding public transportation. It's affordability, physically being able to use it, and actually knowing how to use it. So we have one county that's quite rural that does have some public transportation routes. And when they have large gatherings of older adults, actually bring the buses there so that they can teach people how to use them. That's a low-cost solution, no-cost solution where there is public transportation. The Offices for the Aging also provide transportation through paid drivers and volunteer drivers, as was mentioned. Senior centers, some do, some don't, depending on where they are and what size they are. Our network provides about $25 million worth of transportation rides per year for a variety of different things. New York State just launched a rural transportation task force to really try to build up the entire state's capacity of transportation, not only public, but non-public as well. And Donna mentioned GoGo Grandparent. We have a partnership with them where we're going to be launching in about a week that any resident in New York State can try it free for 1 month. And then we've provided some supplemental funding to the area agencies on aging to be able to provide transportation to those that can't afford it. But it's a service right now that's available to any older adult in New York State. And what differentiates it between Uber and Lyft is that the drivers are trained in the unique needs of older adults. So those are some options. And again, transportation is always going to be an issue, and the state is moving forward to try to address those gaps. Our efforts around developing a master plan for aging obviously is going to have a transportation component in it as well. So I think we're going to end there today. I want to thank again Licet Gaveau, the Executive Director of the Governor's Traffic Safety Council, Rob Lopez, the Highway Safety Program Representative for the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee, and Donna Stressel, outpatient therapist occupational therapist at Sunnyview Rehab Center. I hope this was really helpful. It's an extraordinarily important topic for all of us, for our health and safety and our independence. I want to remind people we probably won't be back until January. We're going to be talking about the Empire State Senior Games in New York State. I want to remind people that hospitalizations for the flu are increasing dramatically, and COVID-19 is still top 5 deaths in the United States of America. So if you haven't gotten your flu shot and your COVID booster, please get those. As always, I want to thank Alex, Darren, and Roger from our communications team to make this production successful. I hope you all have a happy and healthy holiday season, and we'll see you in the new year.
Live with Greg is a production of the New York State Office for the Aging Communications Bureau.